The Millionaire's caregiver. Chloe had always been a fighter. Life had thrown challenge after challenge at her, and she met each one head-on. But the weight of the past few years had left her teetering on the edge. At 25, she was a single mother to 6-year-old Lucas, her bright and curious boy who gave her reason to keep going, even when the world seemed stacked against her. However, with bills piling up and opportunities scarce, hope felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. One dreary afternoon, as the rain pattered against the small apartment's windows, Chloe noticed a flyer her neighbor had slipped under her door. It read, "Private caregiver needed for high-profile client. Demanding work. Excellent pay. Discretion required." She read it 3 times, the words "excellent pay" flashing like a beacon of light. Her mind swirled with questions. Could she manage this? What did demanding entail? Still, the thought of Lucas having a warm bed and proper meals pushed her to pick up the phone and call. The next morning, Chloe arrived at the grand estate. The imposing wrought iron gates creaked open to reveal a sprawling garden, its vibrant flowers in stark contrast to the gray sky. Her breath hitched as she approached the front door, where a housekeeper named Lucy greeted her. Lucy, a no-nonsense woman with a soft smile, led her inside. "Mr. Foster doesn't tolerate incompetence," Lucy warned as they walked through the marble hallways. "He values punctuality and professionalism above all else. Speak only when necessary, and you'll be fine." In the study, Chloe met Arthur Foster for the first time. A man in his late 40s, Arthur exuded an aura of power despite being confined to a wheelchair. His sharp eyes studied her as though dissecting every detail of her life. "Why do you want this job?" he asked bluntly. Chloe straightened her shoulders. "To give my son a better life. I'm willing to work hard for that." Arthur's expression didn't soften, but after a moment's silence, he nodded. "Start tomorrow. Don't disappoint me." The following day began early. Lucy guided Chloe through Arthur's routines, emphasizing the importance of precision. Bathing and dressing him were her primary tasks, and though Chloe had experience caring for others, this was a different world. Arthur was rigid and distant, speaking only in clipped sentences. During their first bath, Chloe noticed the scars on his hands and back, marks of a past riddled with pain. Though curiosity gnawed at her, she respected his boundaries and said nothing. As the days turned into weeks, Chloe began to see glimpses of the man behind the cold exterior. He read voraciously, wrote in a leather-bound journal, and stared out the window for hours, lost in thought. Arthur's sister, Evelyn, made occasional appearances. Elegant and imposing, she had a knack for veiled insults. "I hope you're up to the task," she remarked during one visit, her tone dripping with skepticism. Chloe responded with quiet confidence, determined not to let Evelyn's haughty demeanor shake her resolve. One evening, after Lucas called to excitedly share a drawing he'd made, Chloe sat alone in the kitchen, reflecting on her journey. She missed Lucas terribly, but this job was her ticket to a brighter future. She resolved to push through, no matter how challenging Arthur's demeanor became. The next morning, Arthur surprised her with an unexpected question. "Why do you care so much about other people? Isn't it exhausting?" Chloe paused, meeting his gaze. "Because people matter. My son matters. Even if life is hard, we all deserve someone to believe in us." Arthur looked away, his jaw tightening. "Belief doesn't change the past." "No," Chloe agreed softly, "but it can shape the future." For the first time, Arthur didn't reply with a snide comment. Instead, he sat quietly, seemingly lost in her words. Over time, Arthur began opening up in small ways. Chloe learned he'd been a successful entrepreneur before a car accident left him paralyzed. The tragedy had not only taken his mobility, but also strained his relationships. His fiancée had left him, unable to cope with the new reality, and he'd withdrawn from the world, convinced everyone saw him as broken. One rainy afternoon, while tidying his room, Chloe stumbled upon a photo album. In it were pictures of Arthur standing tall, his arm around a radiant woman who Chloe recognized as Evelyn. The contrast between the joyful man in the photos and the somber figure she knew now was striking. When Arthur caught her looking, he sighed. That was before everything fell apart, before people stopped seeing me as a person. Chloe closed the album gently. You're still a person, Arthur. Your worth isn't tied to what you've lost. Her words lingered in the air, and for the first time, Arthur didn't seem to have a retort. As weeks turned into months, the dynamic between Chloe and Arthur shifted. He began trusting her, sharing snippets of his life, and even cracking the occasional dry joke. Chloe, in turn, found herself growing in confidence. She no longer saw Arthur as a gruff employer, but as someone grappling with profound pain. One morning, Arthur asked Chloe to wheel him outside to the garden. As they sat amidst the flowers, he spoke quietly. "Do you know why I hired you?" Chloe shook her head. "I assumed it was my credentials." Arthur chuckled. "A rare sound. Partly, but mostly, it was your honesty. You didn't try to flatter me or pity me. You reminded me of what it means to keep fighting." Chloe felt a lump rise in her throat. "We all need someone in our corner, Arthur, even the strongest of us." By the end of her first year, Arthur was a changed man. He began taking an interest in the world again, hosting small gatherings, and even starting a foundation to support individuals with disabilities. Chloe, too, found her life transformed. With the salary she earned, she moved Lucas to a better school and rented a cozy apartment where he could play freely. One day, as Arthur and Chloe sat in the garden, Lucas joined them, laughing as he chased butterflies. Arthur watched the boy with a soft smile. "You were right," he said quietly. "Belief does shape the future." Chloe smiled, her heart full. "And it's never too late to start." In the end, the unexpected happened, not just for Chloe, who found stability and purpose, but for Arthur, who rediscovered hope and connection. Their unlikely bond became a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of kindness and perseverance. This story reminds us that no matter how daunting life's challenges may seem, compassion and determination can light the way forward, turning even the most difficult circumstances into opportunities for growth and redemption. A growing connection. Months passed, and Chloe's days at the mansion became a routine she no longer dreaded but embraced. The once overwhelming silence of the vast hallways felt less intimidating. Even Arthur's icy demeanor began to thaw, though his sharp tongue occasionally reappeared. Through small but steady steps, Chloe built a connection with him, one grounded in respect rather than pity. One afternoon, after helping Arthur with his physical therapy session, Chloe lingered in the sunroom while he read. The golden rays of sunlight streaming through the tall windows illuminated the space, giving it an almost ethereal quality. "Do you believe people change?" Arthur asked suddenly, lowering his book. Caught off guard, Chloe considered his question. "Yes, I think they can. But it's not easy. It takes courage and a reason to want to change." Arthur nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "And what about forgiveness? Do you believe that's possible?" Chloe's brow furrowed. "Forgiveness is complicated. It's not about forgetting, but about letting go of the pain that ties you to the past." "Why do you ask?" Arthur didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned his wheelchair to face the window, gazing out at the garden. "Just something I've been thinking about," he said, his voice quieter than usual. A glimpse of vulnerability. That evening, Chloe found herself reflecting on Arthur's question. His guarded nature made her wonder what wounds he carried beyond the physical. The scars on his body were visible, but the ones inside him, those were harder to see. The following day, Chloe arrived early to find Arthur already in the study, staring at an old photograph. As she entered, he quickly set it down, but not before she caught a glimpse of a young man, laughing, with an arm draped over someone who looked strikingly like Evelyn. "Who's that?" she asked cautiously. Arthur hesitated, then sighed. "That's Thomas, my younger brother." Chloe noticed the way his hands tightened on the armrests of his wheelchair. "Were you close?" Arthur gave a bitter laugh. We were once, before everything fell apart. Chloe waited, sensing he had more to say. Finally, he spoke, his voice laced with regret. After the accident, I pushed everyone away, including him. He tried to help, but I couldn't stand the way he looked at me, like I was someone to pity. So I told him to leave and never come back. And he listened. Chloe felt a pang of sympathy. Have you ever thought about reaching out to him? Arthur shook his head. It's too late. Some bridges can't be rebuilt. Chloe's heart ached for him. She knew what it felt like to regret words spoken in anger, but she also believed in the power of reconciliation. It's never too late to try, she said gently. Sometimes the hardest step is the first one. Arthur didn't reply, but his expression suggested her words had struck a chord. Lucas's big visit. A few weeks later, Arthur surprised Chloe by asking about Lucas. You talk about him a lot, he remarked during one of their morning sessions. What's he like? Chloe's face lit up. He's curious and kind, always asking questions about everything. He loves drawing, and he has the biggest imagination. He's my reason for everything. Arthur nodded thoughtfully. Bring him here. The suggestion stunned her. What? Bring Lucas here, Arthur repeated. He should see where his mother works. Besides, I wouldn't mind meeting him. Chloe hesitated, unsure if the mansion was the right environment for her son. But Arthur seemed sincere, and she knew Lucas would be thrilled to visit. That weekend, Chloe brought Lucas to the mansion. The boy's eyes widened as they stepped through the grand entrance. Wow, Mom, this place looks like a castle. Arthur greeted him in the sunroom, where Lucas immediately gravitated toward the shelves of books and artifacts. Are you a king? Lucas asked Arthur, his wide eyes sparkling with curiosity. Arthur chuckled, a sound Chloe hadn't heard in months. Not quite. But I do like to think of this place as my kingdom. Lucas grinned. Can I be your knight? Arthur smiled, a rare warmth in his expression. We'll see. The art of letting go. Lucas's visit seemed to awaken something in Arthur. He became more engaged, not only with Chloe but with the staff and his surroundings. He began spending more time in the garden, often asking Chloe to join him. They'd talk about everything from books to life struggles, and Chloe noticed his sharp edges softening. One day, Arthur surprised her again. I want to write a letter to Thomas. Chloe's eyes widened. Are you sure? Arthur nodded. I've been thinking about what you said. It's time I try to make things right. With Chloe's encouragement, Arthur poured his thoughts onto paper, expressing the regrets and emotions he'd kept bottled up for years. When the letter was finished, he handed it to Chloe. Mail this for me, will you? She took the envelope, her heart swelling with hope. Of course. The unexpected reunion. A month passed without a response, and Arthur began to retreat into his shell again. Chloe tried to reassure him, but doubt gnawed at him. Maybe I was right, he said one evening, his voice tinged with defeat. Maybe it's too late. But then, one crisp autumn morning, the sound of the doorbell echoed through the mansion. Lucy answered, and moments later, a man stepped into the study. Arthur. Arthur turned, his face a mixture of shock and disbelief. Thomas. The younger man smiled hesitantly, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. I got your letter. I had to come. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, to Chloe's astonishment, Arthur wheeled himself forward and extended his hand. I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking. For everything. Thomas clasped his brother's hand tightly. I'm sorry too. Chloe watched from the doorway, tears pricking her eyes. This was what she'd hoped for, a chance for Arthur to heal, not just physically but emotionally. A new chapter. The reunion with Thomas marked a turning point in Arthur's life. The two brothers began rebuilding their relationship, and with Thomas's support, Arthur started venturing out of the mansion. He even attended one of Lucas's school art exhibitions, where he surprised everyone by bidding on one of Lucas's drawings, much to the boys' delight. As for Chloe, Her life transformed in ways she never imagined. Arthur offered her a permanent position as his estate manager, allowing her to spend more time with Lucas. The mansion became a place of laughter and hope, a far cry from the cold, silent halls Chloe had first entered. One evening, as they all sat together in the garden, Arthur turned to Chloe. "You changed everything," he said simply. "Not just for me, but for this house, for my family. I can never thank you enough." Chloe smiled, her heart full. "You didn't need me to change, Arthur. You just needed someone to remind you that you could." The story of Arthur and Chloe is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. It reminds us that even in our darkest moments, the right person can help us find our way back to the light, and that it's never too late to rebuild, reconnect, and start anew. A future rewritten. The seasons changed, and the once dreary mansion had transformed into a lively sanctuary. With Thomas's visits becoming more frequent, Arthur found himself laughing more, even participating in conversations that were once too painful to consider. Lucas, in his unfiltered childhood enthusiasm, became the bridge between everyone, a ray of sunshine in the mansion's echoing halls. Chloe's position as estate manager gave her more stability than she had ever known, but her mind often wandered to a future where she could fully stand on her own, freed from relying on others. Arthur noticed her growing sense of independence and respected it, even encouraging her to think beyond her current role. "You've got potential, Chloe," Arthur said one afternoon, watching her organize a shipment of books for the mansion's library. "You're capable of more than you give yourself credit for." Chloe paused, her hands still on a stack of leather-bound novels. "I'm grateful for this job, Arthur. It's given me a foundation. But you're right. I've always dreamed of running something of my own." Arthur raised an eyebrow. "What kind of business?" She hesitated, the idea feeling too big to say aloud. But Arthur's expectant gaze gave her the courage to voice it. "A daycare," she said finally. "A place where single parents like me can leave their kids knowing they're safe, loved, and learning." Arthur nodded thoughtfully. "That's not just a dream. That's a plan waiting to happen." Arthur's unlikely proposal. A week later, Arthur called Chloe to his study. His tone was serious, but his expression carried a hint of something else. Determination, perhaps. As she entered, she saw him seated behind his desk, a stack of papers neatly arranged in front of him. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair opposite him. Chloe complied, her heart pounding. "Is something wrong?" "On the contrary," Arthur replied. He slid the papers toward her. "This is something I've been working on. It's a proposal." Chloe glanced at the documents, her brow furrowing as she read the title. "Proposal for Bright Futures Daycare, a community initiative." Her eyes widened. "Arthur, what is this?" "This," Arthur said, leaning back in his wheelchair, "is my way of investing in someone who's proven to me that dreams can lead to real change. I've had the resources for years, Chloe, but no direction. You've given me purpose, and now I want to give you the same." Chloe's hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. The proposal outlined funding, resources, and even a potential location for the daycare. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "Say you'll think about it," Arthur said, a rare smile tugging at his lips. "And then say yes." Building a dream. With Arthur's encouragement, Chloe threw herself into the project. At first, she doubted her ability to manage something so ambitious, but Arthur and Thomas were relentless in their support. Arthur connected her with architects, business consultants, and even educators to help her shape her vision. The mansion's sunroom became the project's unofficial headquarters. Lucas often joined the meetings, sketching ideas for playgrounds and classroom layouts. His enthusiasm was infectious, and even Arthur found himself drawn into the creative energy. As construction began on the daycare, Chloe found herself juggling her responsibilities at the mansion. One afternoon, as Chloe watched Lucas playing with the other children in the daycare's garden, Arthur rolled up beside her. "You've built something incredible here," he said. "We've built it," Chloe corrected, smiling. "Together." Arthur nodded, his gaze distant for a moment. You know, for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Chloe placed a hand on his shoulder. That makes two of us. As they sat together, watching the children play, it was clear that this wasn't just the end of one journey. It was the beginning of something much greater. Their story had rewritten not only their futures, but also the futures of countless others, proving that with courage, compassion, and determination, even the most unexpected connections could change the world. This story reminds us that true success isn't measured by what we achieve for ourselves, but by how we lift others. In helping one another, we find strength, healing, and purpose, and in doing so, we leave a legacy that resonates far beyond our own lives. The ripple effect. As the daycare flourished, so did Chloe's confidence. The once shy woman who hesitated to step into Arthur's mansion now spoke with poise and authority. Her journey was more than personal growth. It was an emblem of what perseverance and compassion could achieve. The success of Bright Futures Daycare attracted attention. Local newspapers wrote about Chloe's inspiring story, calling her a pillar of hope for the community. Parents praised her for creating a space where their children could thrive, and volunteers flocked to help expand the daycare's reach. But for Chloe, the most rewarding moments came when she saw the laughter of children echoing through the halls, and the relief on the faces of parents who could finally focus on building their futures. Arthur, however, remained quietly in the background. While he was proud of the role he played in helping Chloe, he resisted the spotlight. One evening, as they reviewed the daycare's plans for expansion, Chloe gently brought up his hesitance. "You've done so much, Arthur," she said, setting her coffee mug on the desk. "You should let people know." Arthur glanced at her, a faint smirk on his lips. "I don't need recognition, Chloe. This is your story." Chloe shook her head. "It's our story. You taught me how to believe in myself. You showed me that second chances aren't just possible. They're necessary." Arthur leaned back in his wheelchair, a thoughtful look crossing his face. "Maybe," he admitted, "but I've still got work to do." The return of Evelyn. While Chloe's bond with Arthur grew stronger, the presence of one person continued to unsettle her: Evelyn. Despite the daycare's success and Arthur's gradual transformation, Evelyn remained cold and distant. She would visit the mansion sporadically, often criticizing small details or making veiled comments about Chloe's position in Arthur's life. "She's always been like that," Arthur said one day, noticing Chloe's frustration after another icy encounter. "Evelyn doesn't know how to deal with change. She clings to what she knows, even if it hurts her." "Why?" Chloe asked, genuinely curious. Arthur sighed, his fingers tracing the armrest of his wheelchair. "Because she's afraid. Afraid of losing control, of being vulnerable. After our parents passed, she became the one who had to hold everything together. She thinks that means she has to be perfect, and make everyone else feel imperfect in the process." Chloe nodded, understanding Evelyn's behavior in a new light. Maybe she just needs to feel included. Arthur's laugh was bitter. "Good luck with that." The bridge to understanding. Determined to bridge the gap, Chloe decided to extend an olive branch. One evening, after Evelyn arrived for dinner, Chloe invited her to join them in the sunroom. To her surprise, Evelyn accepted, though her expression remained guarded. "I've been meaning to thank you," Chloe began, setting a cup of tea in front of Evelyn. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For supporting Arthur, even in your own way," Chloe said sincerely. "I know you care about him, even if it's not always obvious." Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. "Arthur doesn't need my support. He's perfectly capable of running his own life." Chloe hesitated but pressed on. "Maybe, but family isn't about what someone needs. It's about being there, even when they don't ask." Evelyn's gaze softened, just slightly. "You've changed him," she said quietly. "He's happier." Chloe smiled. "We've changed each other." For the first time, Evelyn didn't respond with sarcasm or criticism. Instead, she sipped her tea in silence, her expression contemplative. A new vision. As the daycare expanded, Chloe began to dream bigger. What if they could create similar centers in other towns? What if they could provide not just childcare, but also job training, counseling, and financial literacy workshops for parents? She brought the idea to Arthur, who listened intently. "It's ambitious," he said finally, "but I think you're ready." Chloe grinned. "That sounds like a yes." Arthur chuckled. "It's a cautious yes. Let's start with one additional center and see where it goes." With Arthur's support, Chloe began planning the new initiative, which she called Bright Futures Network. The first satellite center was set to open in a neighboring town, and Chloe poured her heart into ensuring it matched the original standards of care and warmth. Arthur's health scare. Just as everything seemed to be falling into place, a sudden event shook their world. One morning, Arthur didn't come down for breakfast. When Lucy went to check on him, she found him slumped in his wheelchair, unconscious. Chloe arrived at the hospital with Thomas, fear knotting her stomach. The doctors determined that Arthur had suffered a mild stroke. Though his prognosis was good, the incident served as a stark reminder of his vulnerability. When Arthur regained consciousness, Chloe sat by his bedside, her eyes brimming with unused tears. "You scared us," she said softly. Arthur managed a weak smile. "Didn't mean to. Guess I'm not as invincible as I thought." "You need to take care of yourself," Chloe said, her voice firm. "We need you." Arthur's gaze softened. "I'm not going anywhere, Chloe. I promise." A legacy cemented. Arthur's health scare brought the family closer together. Evelyn, shaken by the incident, began spending more time at the mansion, offering her support in ways Chloe never thought possible. Even Lucas noticed the change, commenting one evening, "Aunt Evelyn smiles more now." The Bright Futures Network's second center opened to great success, and Chloe's story continued to inspire others. She was invited to speak at community events, where she shared her journey from struggling single mother to empowered entrepreneur. Through it all, Arthur remained her greatest champion. "You've built something extraordinary," he told her one evening as they sat in the garden, watching Lucas chase fireflies. "And you've shown me that it's never too late to start over." "You've built it with me," Chloe replied, her voice filled with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you." Arthur smiled, his eyes twinkling with a mix of pride and humility. "We've all come a long way, haven't we?" The final lesson. As the years passed, the Bright Futures Network grew, touching countless lives. Arthur continued to mentor Chloe, his wisdom and experience guiding her through challenges. Evelyn became an unexpected ally, helping with fundraising and community outreach. And Lucas, now a teenager, often volunteered at the daycare, eager to give back to the place that had shaped his childhood. The mansion, once a symbol of isolation and pain, had become a hub of connection and hope. Its transformation mirrored the journeys of those within its walls, a testament to the power of second chances, the strength of community, and the enduring impact of kindness. Arthur, now in his 60s, watched from his favorite spot in the garden as Chloe and Lucas prepared for a ribbon-cutting ceremony at the network's newest center. His heart swelled with pride, knowing that his small act of taking a chance on a determined young mother had sparked a movement that would outlive them all. "It's never too late to rewrite your story," Arthur murmured to himself, a contented smile on his face. And with that, the man who once saw himself as broken realized he had become whole, not through wealth or power, but through the simple, profound act of believing in others. The ripple effect. This story reminds us that a single act of kindness can create ripples that transform lives. When we lift others, we don't just change their world, we change our own, leaving behind a legacy that inspires generations to come. The movement grows. Years had passed since Chloe first walked through the grand iron gates of Arthur's mansion. The transformation of her life, and those around her, felt almost surreal. The Bright Futures Network now spanned multiple cities, each center providing a haven for children and parents in need. Chloe had become a well-known figure in the community, a symbol of perseverance and hope. Yet her journey was far from over. An unexpected invitation. One crisp autumn morning, as Chloe was reviewing plans for the network's newest center, she received a call from an unfamiliar number. The voice on the other end introduced themselves as the director of a prominent national nonprofit organization focused on community development. "We've been following your story, Chloe," the director said warmly. "The work you've done is remarkable. We'd like you to join us at our annual leadership summit as the keynote speaker." Chloe's breath caught. The idea of standing before hundreds, possibly thousands, of influential leaders was daunting. She had grown confident over the years, but this was an entirely different stage. "I'm honored," she replied, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I'd be happy to attend." When she told Arthur about the invitation, his reaction was as blunt as ever. "Of course, they want you to speak. You're a force of nature, Chloe." She laughed, shaking her head. "You always know how to boost my confidence." Arthur smiled, a twinkle of pride in his eyes. "Because it's true." Reflections on the past. In the days leading up to the summit, Chloe found herself reflecting on her journey. She thought about the day she first stepped into Arthur's world, overwhelmed by fear, but driven by love for Lucas. She remembered the moments of doubt, the nights spent wondering if she was enough, and the countless lessons Arthur had taught her, both intentionally and through his example. One evening, as she prepared her speech in the sunroom, Lucas, now a teenager, joined her. "Mom, what are you going to talk about?" he asked, curiosity shining in his eyes. Chloe smiled, setting her notes aside. "About how one decision can change everything. How kindness and perseverance can create ripples that touch lives far beyond what we imagine." Lucas nodded thoughtfully. "Like how Mr. Arthur helped us, and now you're helping so many others." "Exactly," Chloe said, her voice soft. "And how it's our responsibility to keep that chain going." Lucas grinned. "You're going to be amazing." The keynote speech. The summit was held in a sprawling conference center, its grand halls buzzing with energy. Chloe felt a mix of excitement and nerves as she took the stage, her speech clutched tightly in her hands. The audience, comprising philanthropists, community leaders, and changemakers, fell silent as she approached the podium. She began simply, her voice steady. "A few years ago, I was a single mother with no job, no prospects, and no hope. I was scared, unsure how I'd provide for my son. Then, an opportunity came my way, a job that seemed impossible for someone like me." Chloe shared the story of meeting Arthur, the challenges she faced, and the lessons she learned. She spoke of the importance of believing in others, of taking chances, and of building communities that lift one another. "Every person has the power to create change," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "It starts with a single act of kindness, a single opportunity, and when we pass that kindness forward, it multiplies, creating ripples that can transform the world." The room erupted in applause as she finished, but the moment wasn't about accolades. It was about the message, a reminder of what was possible when people came together to support one another. Arthur's quiet legacy. Back at the mansion, Arthur watched the recording of Chloe's speech from his favorite chair in the sunroom. Evelyn sat nearby, her usual sharp demeanor softened by the warmth of the moment. "She's incredible," Evelyn said, her voice tinged with admiration. Arthur nodded. "She's the best decision I ever made." Evelyn looked at her brother, a rare smile on her face. "And you've changed too, Arthur. More than I ever thought possible." Arthur chuckled. "I had help." Later that evening, Arthur called Chloe. "You were brilliant," he said simply. Chloe's laugh was light, but her words were full of emotion. "I couldn't have done it without you." A new chapter begins. As the Bright Futures Network continued to grow, Chloe began to think about how to make the organization sustainable for generations to come. She worked tirelessly to establish partnerships with schools, local businesses, and government programs, ensuring that the centers could thrive even without her direct involvement. Arthur, now in his 70s, began stepping back from his active role, though he remained a guiding presence. One day, he called Chloe into his study, handing her a thick envelope. "What's this?" she asked, her brow furrowing. "My will," Arthur said matter-of-factly. "I've left a significant portion of my estate to the Bright Futures Network. It's time for the next generation to take the reins." Chloe's throat tightened. "Arthur, I don't know how to thank you." Arthur smiled, his eyes twinkling. "You already have." The mansion transformed. In the years that followed, the mansion itself became part of Arthur's legacy. After his passing, Chloe honored his wishes by transforming the estate into the Arthur Foster Center for Hope, a headquarters for the Bright Futures Network, and a community hub offering workshops, counseling, and resources for families in need. The grand halls that once echoed with silence now buzzed with activity. Children's laughter filled the air, and the garden became a favorite spot for families to gather. A statue of Arthur, seated in his wheelchair with a warm smile, stood at the entrance, a reminder of the man who had believed in second chances. The final ripple. Years later, as Chloe stood in the garden of the Arthur Foster Center, now a woman in her 40s, she watched Lucas, now a young adult, lead a group of volunteers in building a new playground. The sight filled her with pride and gratitude. "You've done well," came a voice behind her. Chloe turned to see Evelyn, now a regular presence at the center. The years had softened her once hard edges, and she had become an advocate for the network, using her influence to expand its reach. "We've done well," Chloe corrected, smiling. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and orange, Chloe reflected on the journey that had brought her here. It had started with a simple ad, a desperate decision, and an unexpected connection, but it had grown into something far greater, a legacy of hope, love, and transformation. And as the laughter of children echoed through the garden, Chloe knew the ripples would continue, spreading far beyond anything she could imagine. The lesson. The power of a single decision, a single act of kindness, can set off a chain reaction that changes lives. When we invest in others, we not only transform their futures, but also create a legacy that endures for generations. Generations of impact. As the years rolled on, the Arthur Foster Center for Hope became a cornerstone of the community, its reach extending far beyond what anyone could have imagined. The ripples of Arthur and Chloe's shared vision began to flow into new territories, influencing families, communities, and even government policies that supported single parents and disadvantaged families. Chloe's leadership had not only solidified the Bright Futures Network, but had turned it into a national movement. Despite her busy schedule, she never lost sight of the personal connections that had brought her to this point. But the challenges she faced now were far greater than those she had known in the early days. A global opportunity. One day, Chloe received an invitation that would once again push her beyond her comfort zone. An international organization dedicated to tackling childhood poverty had taken notice of the Bright Futures Network and invited her to join their board. The position wasn't just honorary. It required travel, strategic planning, and advising on global initiatives. When she told Lucas about the offer, now a confident young man in his 20s, his reaction surprised her. "You have to do it, Mom," he said, his eyes shining with pride. "You've always told me to dream big. This is your chance to do that on a whole new level." Chloe smiled, but her heart felt heavy. "If I say yes, I'll have to travel more. I won't be here as much." Lucas shrugged, his grin playful. "You've taught me everything I need to know, and the center's in good hands. You trained an amazing team." Chloe laughed, tears pricking her eyes. "You've grown into someone I'm so proud of, Lucas. I hope you know that." "Because I had you," he said simply. Building bridges across borders. Chloe accepted the position and began her new role. Her first project involved replicating the Bright Futures model in underserved areas overseas. She traveled to rural villages, urban slums, and war-torn regions, meeting parents and children whose struggles mirrored her own past. One memorable trip took her to a small village where a single mother named Amina had been struggling to support her 3 children. The conditions were harsh: scarce resources, limited schooling, and a lack of basic infrastructure. Yet, Amina's determination shone brightly. She reminded Chloe of herself, standing strong against the odds. "I want to build something for my children," Amina told Chloe, her voice filled with quiet resolve. "But I don't know where to start." Chloe took Amina's hand. "That's why we're here, to start together." With funding from the international organization and Chloe's guidance, the village opened its first community center 6 months later. Amina became its director, a symbol of hope for others in the region. A reunion and a revelation. During one of Chloe's rare trips back to the Arthur Foster Center, she was greeted by a familiar face: Thomas, Arthur's brother. Though Thomas had been an occasional visitor, his life had largely been focused on his family and career elsewhere. But this time, he came with a surprising revelation. "I've been doing some thinking, Chloe," Thomas said as they sat in the garden Arthur had loved so much. Arthur believed in second chances. "It's time I follow his example." Chloe raised an eyebrow. "What are you saying, Thomas?" "I want to dedicate my time and my resources to expanding the Bright Futures Network even further. I've seen what it's done for families here, and I want to be part of that." Chloe was stunned. "Thomas, that's incredible. Are you sure?" He nodded. "It's what Arthur would have wanted. And honestly, it's what I need. I'd spent too much time focusing on myself. This is my chance to give back." Together, they launched the Arthur and Thomas Foster Initiative, a program aimed at mentoring aspiring entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. It became a cornerstone of the Bright Futures Network, equipping parents with the tools to build sustainable futures for their families. A surprise from Lucas. Meanwhile, Lucas, inspired by his mother's work, had been quietly planning something of his own. One evening, as they sat together on the porch of their modest but cozy home, he handed Chloe a folder. "What's this?" she asked, flipping it open. "A proposal," Lucas said, grinning. "I want to start a scholarship fund for kids who grow up in single-parent homes. There are so many talented kids out there who just need a chance." Chloe's throat tightened as she read through his detailed plans. "Lucas, this is incredible. You've thought of everything." "I had a good teacher," he said, his voice teasing but full of affection. Chloe hugged him tightly, overwhelmed with pride. "You're going to change lives, Lucas, just like Arthur did for us." Chloe's new mission. As Chloe continued to balance her global responsibilities with her local commitments, she found herself drawn to a new mission: advocating for systemic change. She began lobbying for policies that supported single parents, affordable childcare, and accessible education. Her speeches reached the ears of lawmakers, and her initiatives gained traction in government circles. One of her proudest moments came when she stood in front of Congress, presenting a bill that would allocate federal funding for community childcare centers modeled after the Bright Futures Network. The bill passed with overwhelming support, a testament to the impact of her work. A legacy of love. In her later years, Chloe returned to the Arthur Foster Center, now a global hub for innovation and family support. Though her hair had begun to gray and her pace had slowed, her spirit remained as vibrant as ever. She spent her days mentoring young leaders, sharing stories of her journey, and reminding them that every act of kindness had the power to create ripples. Lucas, now a successful philanthropist in his own right, often joined her, carrying forward the legacy she and Arthur had built. One evening, as she sat in the garden, she looked at the plaque beneath Arthur's statue. The words etched into it captured everything they had achieved together. "A life spent lifting others is a life well lived." Chloe smiled, the weight of her journey lifting as a sense of peace washed over her. She had found her purpose, and through that purpose, She had touched countless lives. The ripples would continue long after she was gone, a testament to the power of belief, love, and second chances. The enduring lesson. This story reminds us that our actions today shape the world of tomorrow. By lifting others, we create ripples of kindness, hope, and opportunity that transcend time, ensuring that our impact lives on in the hearts and lives of future generations. A circle completed. Chloe's life, marked by trials, triumphs, and transformations, had come full circle. From a struggling single mother searching for hope to a global leader inspiring change, her journey stood as a testament to what compassion, determination, and a single chance could achieve. The Arthur Foster Center for Hope remained her home base, not just physically but emotionally. It was here that she had rediscovered her worth, built a future for her son, and ignited a movement that spanned the globe. The garden, once a quiet retreat for Arthur, now bustled with life. Children playing, parents chatting, and volunteers working together to ensure the center's continued success. A farewell gift. One morning, Chloe called a meeting in the sunroom. Gathered around her were Lucas, now in his 30s, Evelyn, whose once icy demeanor had thawed into warmth, Thomas, still actively mentoring young entrepreneurs, and a group of staff and volunteers who had become like family. "I've been thinking about the future," Chloe began, her voice steady but laced with emotion. "And I believe it's time for me to take a step back." The room fell silent. Lucas was the first to speak. "Mom, you've built this. You're the heart of everything we've done." Chloe smiled, reaching for his hand. "And because of that, I know it will continue to thrive without me. This was never about one person. It's about all of us." She turned to Evelyn and Thomas. "Arthur taught us that giving others a chance can change the world. That's the legacy we carry forward." Finally, she addressed the group as a whole. "I'll still be here in spirit, but it's time for me to focus on something new, to spend more time with my family, and to trust all of you to take this movement even further than I ever could." A life well lived. In her retirement, Chloe found joy in the simple moments, tending the garden, attending Lucas's events, and mentoring the next generation of leaders. She occasionally traveled to visit new Bright Future centers, where she was greeted as a beloved figure, though she always deflected the praise, insisting the credit belonged to the entire community. One sunny afternoon, as Chloe sat in the garden, watching children run and laugh, Lucas joined her, carrying a small notebook. "What's that?" she asked, curiosity lighting her eyes. Lucas grinned. "I've been writing down your story. I think it's time the world knows how it all started." Chloe chuckled, shaking her head. "It's not just my story, Lucas. It's Arthur's, yours, and everyone who believed in something bigger than themselves." "That's the best part," Lucas said, his voice filled with admiration. "It's a story about all of us." The final lesson. As the years passed, the Bright Futures Network continued to expand, touching lives in ways Chloe could only have dreamed of. The center she had built with Arthur became a symbol of what was possible when people chose to believe in one another. Chloe's life left an indelible mark, not just through the centers or the family she helped, but through the lessons she embodied. No matter where you start, no matter how broken you feel, every person has the power to rise, to rebuild, and to lift others along the way. In the end, Chloe's journey was not just about finding hope, it was about creating it for others. And in doing so, she proved that the most enduring legacy is not one of wealth or power, but of love, compassion, and the belief that a single act of kindness can change the world. The legacy that lives on. Years after Chloe's passing, a plaque was installed in the garden of the Arthur Foster Center. It read, "Here grew a legacy of hope, watered by love and nurtured by courage. Let this garden remind us all that even the smallest seeds of kindness can bloom into a forest of change." The center remained a beacon for generations, its roots firmly planted in the lessons of those who came before. And as children laughed and played under the shade of its trees, the ripples of Chloe's journey continued, proving that every life, no matter how humble its beginnings, has the power to transform the world. This concludes the story. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you found it enjoyable. If you did, please consider liking the video and sharing it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell for more captivating stories. Have a great day.